It is my absolute pleasure to have Calista Redmond, CEO of RISC-V International, join me today. Calista boasts over 20 years of senior leadership experience in roles that have all had a strong focus on developing technology ecosystems and open source communities. During her early career, Calista played a pivotal role in founding and nurturing four successful startups in the IT industry. And if that weren't enough, she then ventured into IBM and began spearheading partnerships for their systems and technology group. Eventually, you then earned the role of vice president for IBM's Z ecosystem and led strategic relationships with some of the largest software vendors, system integrators, business partners, and developer communities across the industry and across the globe. Um, your advocacy for open source or open ecosystems has established your international presence. And now, as the CEO of RISC-V International, you use your insights and platform to bolster the value and adoption of RISC-V across industries and across the world. Calista, I'm eager to hear about your journey to becoming the CEO and your valuable perspective on RISC-V's significance in advancing other technologies. So, with that, welcome.
Thank you so much, Justin. Great to be here.
Absolutely. My first question tends to surface fascinating stories. So, what originally sparked your interest in developing technology partnerships and more broadly technology ecosystems?
Well, we all get our passion and inspiration from somewhere. And for me, it sort of had hints of it while growing up and watching my father in the public sector to try and help education and level the playing field for folks from all social strata in farmlands of Minnesota, and trying to kind of bring everybody to a level of parity and an opportunity to succeed. So I saw that in education. And then much later in my career, I went to Africa, and I was participating in a collaboration between Sumitomo Group and a local bednet manufacturer in Arusha, Tanzania. And we were trying to figure out ways to both lessen the impacts of malaria on the population while boosting the earning power and market opportunities of women in the area as a distribution network. So I started to get this idea that technology has the power for good. It has the power to level playing fields. It has an opportunity to create and foster growth uh, from individual personal levels through to multinationals. And 'cause those are some of the driving forces for me in cultivating my career around things that could really kind of have a greater impact that's not only greater than myself, but greater than my mission, to really help and grow and build various economies based on technology around the world.
Well, thank you for that. And you may not have known this, but we have some similar roots. My parents, my mother in particular, was an educator, and I have Midwestern roots as well, coming from Indiana. And actually, a lot of what has led me over this past year journey through proliferating voices like yours that so firmly help the democratization of technology has to do with the trip I took last June to Zambia. So I did not know that about your story. So fascinating. Can you walk me through your career journey and highlight any pivotal decisions or moments, relationships that impacted your path to your current role as CEO of RISC-V International?
Through my startups that you mentioned, four different startups prior to, going back and getting an MBA to learn how to do things correctly. Through those startups, I realized that, barriers to technology, regardless of education level, is based on utility. Is it easy to use? Can I find my way around? Or is it just another frustrating experience? As we, used technology to better connect elected legislators with their constituents to, kind of harness opinions over to helping, lawyers really navigate the system. And, all kinds of strange things that the barriers were simple, and what was needed were simple solutions. That simplicity and that access kind of helped follow me through my career into IBM. At IBM, I was part of the systems and technology group, which, in other words, the hardware part of the business, not software, not services, but the hardware part of the business, where we were looking at various types of relationships to further the organization's goals. That could be through acquisition, through partnership, through joining into existing ecosystems, to spawning our own ecosystems around various things that were important to the business. And so through that, really started to look at, there's more than one way to get there. You could form great partnerships that are mutually beneficial for everyone engaged, or you could engage in open and transparent relationships through open source, whether that's on the tech or the software side. Help to build three different open source hardware oriented pieces at IBM, starting in networking, and then to open power, and then finally in mainframe, or System Z as it's known, and really started to kind of look for opportunities to engage the best interests of everyone. Obviously, IBM had a great interest in each of those plays, and it was equally important to me to engage folks that could see their own mission aligning, their own success in that future relationship.
Okay, and so what began as an academic project is now a well-substantiated ISA, and RISC-V gained prominence in edge and IoT applications that have smaller workloads than things compared to, say, like a data center. Now we're seeing a shift towards the adoption of RISC-V in applications that require a substantial compute power. What factors or events have triggered this transition?
It's sort of something that's been running in parallel. RISC-V is an instruction set architecture, which is your very base building block. It's the flour that you could build into cookies or a loaf of bread, or any other type of instantiation. And while it started and embedded in low power, lightweight devices, that's because many of them carried their own software stack, and you didn't have to rely on such a massive ecosystem around that to sort of carry that through to productization. So, while it started there, it started moving across all parts of the spectrum, but you're only now starting to see that come to fruition. When you're building hardware, it takes several years. It's not something that can be done, over a holiday break or over a weekend. But we're getting there. We're getting much closer to that, because what RISC-V is that base building block. You can then add on to the extensions that really serve the workload that you're going after. So for RISC-V, it's modular, right? So if you want to choose your own adventure as low power, lightweight, and those are sort of the design challenges you're wishing to meet, or you want to go for high performance, let's really pedal to the metal on that performance to really gain competitive advantage in AI or acceleration or some other capability in a data center, you have both options. You can take, that base recipe and build it into that. That's very different from the other options that are out there that have been incrementally built and, if you will, kind of composed as a large black box, and you get the whole thing. So that design flexibility really has been moving along all parts of the spectrum at once. In fact, our HPC special interest groups is one of the longest standing special interest groups that we have. And it's because you have that potential.
No, well, and you know what? Last month at the summit, Mark Himmelston, your CTO, said RISC-V isn't everywhere yet, and it got me thinking about a lot of the different opportunities. Where do you foresee the greatest potential for RISC-V to grow in the next in the shorter term, 2 to 3 years? And then what are your thoughts on the potential in the more distant future?
Well, the future is already here, and I think what Mark was trying to elaborate on is that you don't see that it's everywhere yet, but it's cooking. It's in the kitchen. It hasn't been brought out to the dining room yet, but it is absolutely in motion everywhere you look. And you hear that through stories across our ecosystem where folks are bringing out high performance SoCs where this last year, I came home from an event with the first RISC-V laptop. That's a very far stretch from where we were just a couple of years ago, and it's because these things take time. You heard at the conference about Android on RISC-V, and the advances being made around 5G communications from infrastructure to handsets. You're starting to hear a lot more on automotive, where safety is critical and security is critical across all workloads, but of course in automotive as well. So you're starting to see this. Has it arrived fully? Is it out in the dining room already across all of this spectrum? Maybe not yet, but you are going to see that in the next couple of years. And part of that is sort of the design process and getting it through to tape out and into production. And part of that is the ecosystem or all the software and other moving parts that depend on that central SoC to catch up as well.
Within the community, there are many voices that are advocating for RISC-V to become the universal open architecture. And there are, on the other hand, different opinions on why RISC-V is a way forward. And I think it's worth highlighting some of those perspectives. Could you elaborate on why a hyperscaler might find leveraging RISC-V beneficial and how that may differ from the perspective of, say, a developer?
So, a hyperscaler has the ability and sort of volumes to design their own, right? And so they can get very specific to the competitive differentiators that they're fine tuning for. Again, it comes back to design freedom. A developer, on the other hand, if you're talking about a software developer, they don't want to think too hard about the software, or about the hardware underneath. But wow, if they can advantage their software to run better on one thing versus another, then they're going to support that particular architecture. Something like Red Hat. Red Hat supports x86, ARM, Power, Z, the whole gambit, right? But it took getting to a certain level of maturity for them to kind of port and bring onto that workload. And that's what you're seeing. You're starting to see all of these different development communities look at and recognize that there is potential and growth happening on RISC-V. And it's not just a technical discussion, it's a business discussion. They're saying, you know what, I need to have multiple lines of business to participate in multiple types of markets and opportunities. So yes, it now makes sense for me to run on RISC-V as well, a both end approach. And, from a design side, if you're designing hardware, it depends. If you're a large multinational who has this massive investment already in a legacy architecture, it's a pretty sketchy career move to go throw that out, right? I mean, that's a big day. You better bring all your stuff with you because that's a tough conversation. If you're going in to say, you know what, here's a workload and an opportunity that we don't have a significant share in today, and we'd like to more fully participate in that, we think we could win with RISC-V, bringing in an additional new opportunity, adjacent space, then that's an argument that they can bring. On the other end of the spectrum, you're an entrepreneur, you don't have that legacy investment. You're looking at new workload opportunities, popular ones in AI or acceleration or, any of the other, corners that they're sticking microprocessors into these days. And that's like greenfield opportunity where there isn't one large, player already. There's room for anyone to go and make their business.
I'm glad you tied that in. One of the things that has just consistently blown me away about the RISC-V community and really being able to experience it at the summit, you've got developers, you've got hardware engineers, you've got business people, and there's such a sense of camaraderie and collaboration. And it's kudos to you and the leadership team because you've clearly developed an environment, a culture where it's truly a democratic process and a productive process for advancing technology. And amongst these different groups, there's strong personalities and there's strong views, and oftentimes they're conflicting. Can you give us a little insight into how you've been able to develop such a culture like that?
I could sum that up very quickly. With democracy comes diplomacy, right? And at the end of the day, each of our stakeholders, big, small, new, have been in the industry for decades, we all have this shared collective interest in the long term, durable, strategic value of RISC-V. And so, with that shared vision constant in everyone's mind, that we are creating something for the test of time. We are creating something that must be frozen and last for generations to come and compute. It brings a different mindset. This isn't who can get product to market within the quarter, who's going to win the race this year. This is about setting and laying a bedrock for everyone to be able to build on for the rest of time. And so there's the mentality. And with that, then it's easier to tackle the diplomacy. And so that diplomacy then needs to be instrumented, right? We strive through everything we do for consensus. And then when we're, at some level of consensus, then we go full democratic and, start to vote on things. So when an extension comes through the process, there's a proposal phase, there's an oversight of that, there's kind of how does it interweave with other extensions in flight or already ratified, because all of these pieces need to work in harmony. And it's a little bit of a trick when you've got more than 75 different groups working on different things, right? So that collaboration is critical for individual and collective success. So once you get to a certain point, you say, all right, everything's been checked and double checked, T's crossed, I's dotted, what have you. Then you go into public review, and you stand back and you look at, well, what are the criticisms? What are the things? Do we need to make any additional adjustments, or are we ready to freeze? Because there's not going to be a patch later, right? It's not software. You don't get to go and say, I changed my mind about this USB standard. We're going to go do it a different way. No, that disrupts entire industries, right? So, for us, it's getting to as close to perfection as possible. Freeze it, agree on it, ensure that we're all on board, vote and ratify it.
Absolutely. And you know what, that question really sets the stage for us to discuss a topic that I'm deeply passionate about and I believe is critically important, and that's democratizing technologies, specifically AI, machine learning, and accelerated compute. These are some of the most powerful technologies that have come and I believe will come for decades. And so, how does the RISC-V ISA contribute to making these technologies accessible to everyone?
So RISC-V again allows for anyone to participate, right? That together in building your own chip, or in your using RISC-V as part of your overall strategy, you really have opportunity to engage directly with the ISA. But it also opens up opportunity for different development or IP partners. And it also opens up opportunity to go after different markets and opportunities. So by taking an open approach versus a proprietary approach, you're not locked into any one strategic agenda. You're not locked into a proprietary stakeholder, and you kind of have to cross your fingers that strategy sticks for as long as you're in that business. Because those things shift and change, right? But the collective vested interest in RISC-V means that strategy is the collective interest of the community and can go in multiple directions at once. You don't have to worry that one thing is kind of losing out to another on funding, because there's a whole collective that's moving everything forward. That continues to be important when you're looking at supply chain, IP development partners, your ability to pick and choose freely and then to weave and bring that design together gives you an advantage. And that's not something you can do with just any architecture. There are, very clear limits on what you can and cannot do with a proprietary architecture. And by the way, once you build it, you have to go sell it somewhere. So that market opportunity, how the interoperability of RISC-V will work within other systems, you might have one or two targets in mind today, but it opens you up then to adjacent spaces as well.
Could you share maybe one or two examples of success stories from RISC-V member companies in their respective markets and how those accomplishments contribute to meaningful impacts on humanity?
We see a lot of startups on RISC-V, more startups on RISC-V than any other architecture in history. Some of them are incredibly well funded as well. You see things like Sci5 and Ventana and TensTorrent as some of the companies that are very, very young companies with very deep expertise that have been coming to market and doing very well. When you bring together, a RISC architecture, RISC-V in particular, with long roots into RISC architectures that were developed in the 1980s, there is a wealth of experience that already exists brought together with those new opportunities. So this is inspiring startups around the world. One of the things that I'm excited to see are countries, entire countries getting involved. So you see and hear a lot about grants in the European Union that are earmarked for RISC-V technology. You see and hear the engagement from university alliances between the U.S. and China that are really helping progress the state of the art. You see and hear this happening in India, where they've turned their Shakti project over to RISC-V, and they are on a plan and a program of RISC-V as a national architecture by infusing it in universities, incubating startups, building developer communities, and those types of activities are opening doors that just didn't exist before. We're talking to, maybe you saw them at the summit, the Ministry of IT out of Brazil. You know, these countries, Pakistan as well, they want to participate and grow their digital economy. And RISC-V has brought that to the forefront.
Absolutely. And what a wonderful segue into you talk about opening doors. And as a father of four daughters and someone leading a recruiting and talent advisory firm, I recognize and see the necessity of diverse perspectives in talent pools to create successes like the ones you mentioned. Your advocacy for increasing the representation of female engineers and leaders is evident, and it was heard at the summit, and it's awesome. How is RISC-V International addressing the challenge of increasing female representation within its membership?
I would start with a very brief statement. I feel like I keep giving you these brief statements. You got to walk the walk, right? You got to role model what you want to see in your community through your leadership, through who you bring on stage, through the leadership of various technical work groups. And when you see representation that is familiar, that looks like you, talks like you, it becomes a more welcoming community. And that welcoming and inclusive community is something that we talk about a lot in every one of our groups. It's important for us to hear all voices. It may be a gender difference, it may be language difference, it may be cultural difference. We have so many differences, but that brings a richness to the dialogue. I've sat in board meetings where we hear anecdotes from like traditional texts to help guide our thinking. I'm like, wow, this is like mind blowing. You wouldn't hear that if it was a bunch of people like me from farmland Minnesota. You hear that because we all bring these different cultural distinctions to the table, and a lot of times that's in gender representation, and that's a tough one, right? So, I don't know if you saw, we have a lot of diversity scholarships to attend our summits. We offer that. We offer a lot of online as well as fostering training through universities. We engage with mentor-mentee relationships very actively on technology projects, and we invite and engage, various folks from around the world this way. At the summit, I got an opportunity to speak with someone from Pakistan who was here for the summit on a scholarship that she had won from us, well, earned from us, um, 2 years ago, but couldn't get the visa to get there. And she finally made it. And she was so excited. It was such an honor to meet her and welcome her into the community. So there are so many barriers to engaging. Sometimes it's a visa, sometimes it's language, sometimes it's just feeling welcome. And so those are some of the values and things that we instill deeply in our community and ensure that there are, mechanisms in place to make folks feel welcome and included. At our summit, we have buttons to talk about pronouns. We have buttons to talk about, like, I'm approachable, let's shake hands, to, I'm just here to listen. I need a little buffer. Um, and I wore one of those because I had a cold at the time. But you have all of these different mechanisms on, here's how to engage with me so that I feel comfortable showing up, and when I'm ready to participate and engage.
Well, that's inspiring, and one of the things that I would like to, on behalf of SBT, commit to is to fund one diverse candidate to a scholarship on each continent that you have the summits next year.
Thank you. We'll definitely put it to good use. Thanks, Justin.
Absolutely. Building on that last question, is there an actionable insight or advice that you would offer technology leaders on how they could effectively increase female representation at their companies?
Yeah, look for the folks who are eager and hungry, and feed and foster that. Bring challenges forward, mentor them one on one, give them honest, like, help in pressing for the next step forward, advocate for those folks to strive for, to earn, to prepare for that next step in their career. What I see happening is a lot of folks don't see a path for themselves forward because it may not be a traditional path. It may not follow a traditional engineering trajectory. There's room for everyone here, whether you have a bold, general or deep engineering degree or background, or whether you don't. There's a spot in this ecosystem for a lot of different voices, from our marketing team to our engineering team to our the many of the architects that work on the specs. So there's a lot of room. Help cultivate and drive the passions and interests of the folks in your organizations, and look for those opportunities to push them out in the spotlight or forward on the next challenge in their career, so they can feel that confidence and growth in their career.
Absolutely. And, while I believe it's important that companies and organizations bear responsibility for increasing female representation in their technology, et cetera. I think that there's also a very significant personal role that women should embrace in driving their own career outcomes and trajectories. Would you agree?
I do think so. Everyone kind of needs to take ownership of their career, but we also need to recognize that we're all in some kind of spotlight. People are watching, right? It actually surprises me sometimes that folks notice, like, odd things that I've done in my career to push forward. But I do think it's important to, again, role model what you're looking for, engage with that, mutual respect. When you're not being heard, continue to raise your hand. Don't just sit back and say, oh, my voice isn't welcome here. Push forward on that. Have the confidence to know that every voice actually matters a lot. When I look at my staff and, whether it's a junior or middle or senior level person on the team or in the community, I engage everyone as my peer or as perhaps, like I need to follow them. Understand those moments when you're being followed versus when you're following someone else. And it has nothing to do with title or role.
Well, your insights about increasing the representation of women in tech and the benefits it brings, like broadening the diversity of perspectives and opening the door wider to an important talent pool, are remarkable. And I think we can both agree still the talent shortage in semiconductor and chip architecture development will likely still persist. What advice or strategies would you suggest for companies trying to hire in the RISC-V space? And do you have any success stories from member companies that have done an outstanding job of attracting and hiring talent?
So, once upon a time, the largest part of a campus for technology was devoted to the hardware engineers. And then there was this small little building devoted to software. Well, then it started to tip the other direction, right? And software was really popular, and the hardware guys were sort of relegated to a smaller part of the campus. I think we're going to start to see that even out. While there's always been, or for the last couple decades, a lot of opportunity in software, we're starting to see growing opportunity to really chart your own course in hardware. And it's things like RISC-V that are ushering in that potential. So I do think that there's a lot of growth opportunity in hardware, especially when you look at the trajectories going on in the semiconductor space. So there's a lot of opportunity. I think it's going to take a minute for that popularity in universities to catch up, but I do think you're going to continue to see that growth. And bringing prominence to opportunity in hardware is something that we can do to help shore up talent everywhere. RISC-V is very dedicated to building talent around the world. We have 3 different programs that we do. We have our Learn Online programs with certification paths to get to be a RISC-V certified individual. We have engagement with universities who are turning prior courses on proprietary architectures over onto RISC-V. So you can really go from idea to tape out as in the university. That starts to seed and fuel where your career is going next. We work with those universities on hackathons and bug bounties, the whole thing. And then the third part of that is we work with a lot of training partners and institutions around the world. Now, on the finding talent, once you're in the workforce, we're doing a few things there too. We have career fairs. We work with different companies in our ecosystem to say, you're looking for all this talent. How can we help promote these roles back to our community? We've got around 14,000 developers in our community today. Many of them move around jobs. We see them at one member, they pop up at another member. Folks are building their careers, right? And RISC-V jobs are really hot. You read headlines that sadly talk about layoffs going on around the industry. That's not happening in RISC-V. RISC-V is a huge growth engine right now, and I have companies coming to me all the time. Where can I find some talent? Or hey, I've got these 2 open roles. Like, do you know anyone? And so building your network if you're looking for a job, and leverage your network if you're trying to hire. And so we certainly do a lot to support those efforts across and around the community.
Absolutely. Would you like to share any closing thoughts about the overall progress and advancement in of RISC-V, or anything about the RISC-V International organization as a whole?
Yeah. We're really proud of what we're doing. We truly believe that RISC-V is inevitable, and it's showing up in the analyst reports. The trajectories of growth are continuing to just get better. Even report to report, it gets stronger. So that growth is really strong. It's a great space to be in. RISC-V International is a great community to be a part of. There's no better way to build your network. And that network can be as an individual looking at your own professional career trajectory or building your own personal eminence in the industry. It can be as a company as you start to cultivate your talent, accelerate their learning by working shoulder to shoulder with the best in the industry. It happens by finding and nurturing new relationships. So many new relationships are happening within our community because they're working side by side. That's how you create and build trust and confidence in a relationship, is by working together. So there's a lot to be gained here. We also have offered a lot of visibility to the efforts of many of our smaller company members. There's one company that said, yeah, I'm not going to launch a product at any other space other than the RISC-V Summit because I don't have that reach all by myself. And we bring that amplification. We bring the foot traffic, right, that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise. So there's a lot of benefit to being part of the community. Some of it is hard to measure. Some of it is very easy to measure. And what you get out of a membership is in part what you put in, but you're going to get a lot more than that back.
Well, exciting things to come. And I want to thank you humbly for being so generous with your time and your insights. It's definitely been informative. If someone wanted to learn more, if they're interested in learning more about RISC-V, becoming a member, or supporting the organization in some other way, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, well, you can check out our website, riscv.org. You can reach out to me. I'm, somewhat easy to find, Calista Redmond on Twitter, LinkedIn, anywhere like that. Welcome to connect with me. Love engaging with the community.
Awesome. Well, again, nothing short of inspiring. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Justin.